Yep, I see it.
Yeah.
All right, well, we can start by introducing ourselves. My name is Lindsay. Hi.
My name is Laura.
Hi, my name is Josephine.
I'm Taylor.
And I'm Kelsey.
Thanks for coming to our presentation on our group project. We are group Eastern 1. Okay, so we'll start with the background and the literature review. So yoga is an ancient practice that originated thousands of years ago. What started as a spiritual practice in India is now a multi-billion-dollar industry with over 20 million practitioners in the United States. And it's likely so popular due to the many potential health benefits that it boasts. So naturally, there's been a lot of research investigating these claims, and many of them have positive outcomes. However, despite the many potential benefits, yoga can be harmful to the body and cause injury if it's not done properly. So as class sizes increase, many students may not get the adjustments and quality live modeling needed to ensure that they are practicing safely. So an alternative to live modeling would be video modeling. And there has been plenty of research proving video modeling to be effective in teaching a variety of skills, and that includes academic skills, social skills, gymnastics, and guitar. And the research has included a diverse range of participants from young children with autism to college students. So Marcus and Wilder in 2009 described 4 advantages to video modeling. And the first is that the cost can be lower than live modeling. So if you take yoga, for example, a class can cost upwards of $20 to take live, but you can watch a YouTube video on how to perform a pose for free. So the second is that videos are portable and they can be used in a variety of settings. And they can be played back repeatedly, providing opportunities for multiple teaching trials. And lastly, tasks in a video can be taught systematically. So it's common that video modeling is used and studied in combination with video feedback and self-evaluation, just like in the study that we found. We can go to the next slide. So the purpose of our study was to replicate the works of an original experiment done by Downs, Miltenberger, Bidronsky, and Witherspoon in 2015. It studied the effects of video self-evaluation on the skill acquisition of yoga postures. So they used a multiple baseline design across the behaviors of 2 college students with no prior yoga experience. And the behaviors were 3 yoga poses: Vrksasana, tree pose, Virabhadrasana, warrior 2, and Svanasana, downward facing dog. So there were 3 phases. Baseline sessions were conducted similar to a yoga class. The researcher would model a pose and then the participant would practice it. But they weren't given any feedback on that practice. And then the next phase, self-evaluation, the participants were recorded practicing the poses and then graded themselves using a task analysis while watching the video back. And then the last phase was video feedback. In this phase, the poses were practiced and recorded and the researchers provided feedback on the video. However, this phase was only implemented if there was not significant improvement in the self-evaluation phase. Unfortunately, the report did not specify what significant improvement was. So the results of the study showed a substantial increase in the accuracy of poses in the self-evaluation phase for both participants. One of the participants needed video feedback, and they did show a greater increase in the accuracy of poses that only moderately improved in the self-evaluation phase. So the procedures showed success, but the researchers recommended further research through replication and variations of their methods. That's where we come in.
So this is the methods of our study. So for the participants and settings, we had 5 females whose age ranged from 24 to 26 years old. We had Jessamine, Kelsey, Laura, Lindsay, and Taylor. All participants were taking graduate level classes at the time of the study, and prior to this study, the participants did not know one another. And so for the setting of the study, data was unable to be collected at one common shared place. Each participant lived in various areas across the United States, so data was collected in each of the participants' home. And data was collected 2 days of the week. The days and times were chosen by the participant that was convenient for themselves. And so materials that we used for this replication study, we had recording devices with playback feature. So it could have been a phone, a tablet, or a computer. A yoga mat could be used. However, this material was optional and not every participant opted to use this material. A task analysis was created for each yoga pose. A writing utensil to mark steps on the task analysis. And then there was a video model that included verbal direction for each pose. This was used during the baseline and the video feedback phase, if it was required for the video feedback. And then a timer to record the duration of each pose. And then each participant utilized a Google Drive where we stored the video recordings. And so now we're going to discuss the behaviors that we defined. So we have Virgasana, which is their tree pose. We defined this as balancing one leg with the bottom of the other foot placed anywhere between the ankle bone and upper thigh of the standing leg, with palms in the center of the sternum for a total duration of 30 seconds. So example of this, the palms are placed in the center of the sternum with elbows pointed outward parallel to the ground. A non-example of this behavior where both feet would be planted on the ground. For our second behavior, we had Virabhasana, which is Warrior Two. We define this as a standing wide leg posture in which the front leg is bent and the arms are parallel to the floor. The torso is oriented in the direction of the front hip points and the head is turned in the direction of the front leg for a total duration of 30 seconds. Example of this behavior is the participant is engaging in the pose with the head turned in the direction of the front leg with the eyes closed. Non-example would be hips are square in the direction of the front leg. And so for our third behavior, we have Savasana, which is commonly known as the downward facing dog. We define this behavior as a posture in which the palms and feet are on the floor and the body is in the shape of an inverted V shape for a total duration of 30 seconds. An example of this, participants' heels do not reach the ground, but the palms and upper feet are on the ground. The body is in the shape of an inverted V shape for a total duration of 30 seconds. A non-example of this would be a participant has both hands on the both palms on the ground, and one foot is on the floor and the other is lifted in the air.
Next, we get into our data collection. So we utilized a task analysis to grade the accuracy of each pose. Each pose had a task analysis that consisted of 8 steps. These steps were made based off of the video models that we used for that pose. Each step was marked with either a plus sign indicating correct or a minus sign indicating incorrect. Grades were then calculated by dividing the number of correctly performed steps by total numbers of steps and multiplying by 100 to calculate a percentage for each pose. The intervention phase was a self-evaluation. This meant that participants graded themselves immediately after watching their video during that phase. However, baseline phase was graded by another group member. We matched up partners round robin style to grade the accuracy of each pose using the task analysis. This same partner who graded the baseline data also graded the IOA data during our intervention phase. Here is an example of our task analysis. You can see we labeled it by session and date, and then each step is listed on the left-hand side, and the accuracy is graded within each of those boxes. Here is our TA for tree pose. Starts off by standing in the middle of the mat with feet together, lift one leg up off the ground, grab a hold of the lifted knee with both hands and balance on your opposite foot. Grab a hold of the lifted leg with the same side hand, guide the lifted leg and place foot on standing leg as high as possible with toes pointed down. Press foot into leg and release hands. Bring hands together at your center, hold pose for 30 seconds. This is our TA for Warrior Two. Again, it's 8 steps for each pose. Warrior 2 starts off both feet placed at the edge of the mat. Take left foot and step back into a high lunge. Open hips and point rear foot at a 90-degree angle. Sink body lower into pose. Align front knee directly above the ankle. Extend both arms out straight. Turn head in direction of bent leg. Hold pose for 30 seconds. Lastly is downward dog. Starts off on hands and knees on the mat. Move hands shoulder width apart. Rotate triceps back so elbows face back of room. Curl toes under your feet. Lift your knees and hips up and back. Align shoulders between the hands and the hips. Look down at the mat to bring head in line with arms. Lastly, hold pose for 30 seconds. Again, we based on the TAs off of the video models that we used.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the baseline phase. So each participant viewed a model of each pose without the sound on. The participant then practiced these poses with the assistance of the video model. Once again, there was no sound for guidance, and then recorded themselves doing each pose. While practicing the poses, a maximum of 3 attempts was allowed per pose, and the final and third attempt would be the pose that's graded. To be counted as correct, a pose must have been held for 30 seconds. The participants did not grade themselves using the task analysis, and they did not review their video for self-evaluation. Instead, a partner graded them for them, and the partners were matched up using a round-robin style. The videos were uploaded to the shared Google Drive for another participant to grade them, and one video contained all 3 poses. Sessions occurred 2 days out of the week. The participants got to pick the days that they occurred, and the videos had to be uploaded by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday of each week in the study to be graded. Next, we're going to talk about the video self-evaluation phase. So during the self-evaluation phase, participants recorded themselves performing each pose. The participants only graded the poses that were in intervention and used a separate task analysis data sheet from the one that was used in baseline. Participants used the recording device with the video facing the front of the participant. Immediately after recording the pose, the participant would play back the video and score the accuracy of each step using the task analysis. Once again, a maximum of 3 attempts was allowed per pose, and the final and third attempt would be graded. To be counted as correct, the pose had to be held for 30 seconds. Each session contained 2 videos that included all 3 poses. Sessions also occurred 2 days out of the week, and videos had to be uploaded to the shared drive by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday of each week for further IOA data collection. Video feedback was a phase that was only implemented if a participant's pose makes minor improvements during VSE. In this phase, the participant would practice the pose while viewing the video model containing verbal feedback with the sound on. The participant would then practice the pose again using the recording device. Immediately after recording the pose, the participant would play back the video while watching the video model for feedback, then grade the pose using the task analysis. The pose had to be held for 30 seconds to be counted as correct. The video would then be uploaded by 11:59 p.m. on Sunday of each week for further IOA data collection. None of the participants in the replication of this study used the video feedback during intervention. Now we're going to talk about our IOA. To determine the reliability of grading, participants graded each other's yoga poses both in baseline and intervention. Participants were matched up round robin style, and the same partners from baseline who graded the poses also graded for IOA. The intervention sessions that were graded were sessions 7, 9, 11, 13, 15, 17, 19, and 21. Exact agreement IOA was used to determine the reliability of task analysis grading. Exact agreement IOA was calculated by counting the number of intervals in the task analysis that both graders were in agreement in and dividing by the number of the total intervals, then multiplying by 100 to get the IOA percentage. The IOA should be above 95% across all poses. Our group's mean IOA agreement percentage was 92, was, 90.2%. Laura's IOA was 80%. Jessamine's IOA was 83%. My IOA was 89%. Kelsey's IOA was 100%. And Lindsay's IOA was 99%.
All right, so now to talk about the social validity of our study. In the original study that we replicated, they had a certified yoga instructor that reviewed the task analysis that the researchers created to ensure that all their steps were accurate. And luckily enough, our group had a certified yoga instructor, and she participated in developing each task analysis for the steps for our poses in the study. And she helped with the accuracy and wording of the steps to each pose. And while this was a limitation for other reasons, it did improve the sociability of our replication. And talking about treatment fidelity, we created a checklist for each participant to use in each session. We had a checklist for baseline and intervention, and after each video was uploaded, we had to answer yes or no to these questions. So we had the date of each video, and can you see your entire body in the video frame? Yes or no. Is the video image clear? Were all 3 yoga poses practiced in the video? Were each pose TA graded after practicing the pose? And was the percentage of steps completed correctly have been calculated? And if the video was up before Sunday at 11:59 p.m.
Okay, so we'll talk about each of our results now. So here's my graph. You can see that the baseline had a little bit of variability, but all the poses started off at a high percentage of accuracy. They never fell below 75%, and some of them started at 100%. But then you can see in self-evaluation, all the poses almost immediately stabilized to 100% accuracy. Go to the next slide. So for downward facing dog, that was the first one that went into intervention. The treatment mean was 100% compared to baseline, which was 97 about. And then warrior 2 went into intervention next. The treatment mean was again 100% compared to baseline, which was about 90%. So that was about a 10% improvement. And then for tree pose, the treatment mean was 98% compared to baseline, which was around 88%. So you can also see that all the poses, the treatment range was smaller than the baseline range, showing that the accuracy became a little bit more consistent in the self-evaluation phase.
Already here are my results. Most of my baselines are at high level, and most of them have a pretty stable trend. There is some variability in the warrior 2 and tree pose baseline, but once I started the self-evaluation, all my poses stabilized almost immediately or after a few sessions to 100% accuracy. Here's all my data. So my treatment mean for downward dog was 98.5%, and then my baseline mean was 77.4%. My warrior 2, the treatment mean was 98.5%, and then the baseline mean was 90%. And then my tree pose, the treatment mean was 100%, and then the baseline mean was 96%.
So these are my results. So my tree pose was like super consistent in my high levels, and then I have downward dog, which started off at like a low level, but then it went up during baseline, and then I had some variability in my warrior 2 pose, but once I implemented the self-evaluation, they went up, and they kind of have some variability, but they stayed at like high levels and most. But also to note that I did mess up 2 of my videos, so I have 2 less data points than everyone else, and we just counted those sessions as errors. because I accidentally put 2 of my poses in intervention at the same time. And my tree pose, my baseline mean was 75%, and my intervention mean went up to 96%. So it did show improvement, and my ranges for baseline was 75 to 75, and then for intervention it was 87 to 100. And Warrior 2, the baseline mean was at 62, and my intervention mean went up to 87, and the baseline range was 25% to 100, and intervention it's been at 87%. And then downward dog, the baseline mean was 70%. It went up to 91.87 in intervention, and baseline range 25% to 87%. And then the intervention was 87 to 100. And yeah.
So these are my results. So for tree pose, I was pretty stable with responding at a high level at about 90% accuracy. Once I went into intervention, I improved up to 100% and had stable responding. For Warrior 2, I had a moderate level, some variability in responding, and then started to have stable responding at about 90% at 60% accuracy. Once intervention was in place for Warrior 2, there was a little immediacy effect of a small magnitude of change where my behavior just increased and had a ascending a trend. There's a little bit of variability, and then it stabled out at 100% and remained in stable responding. For downward dog, my baseline had significant variability where I started out around 60%, and then I had an ascending trend, and then started to variable out a little bit, and then continued to have an ascending trend until I got to stable responding at 100%. Then once intervention took place, I had about stable responding from 90 to 100% with accuracy. So you could see that for me, most of my my behaviors stabilized and maintained 100% accuracy when intervention was taken place. However, for downward dog, my accuracy improved while in baseline, suggesting that something else may have influenced my behavior other than the intervention itself. And so here is my data range with all of my behaviors. So for tree pose, the range was from 87 to 100%, and intervention was 87 to 100. So the range was about the same for both baseline and intervention. However, the mean improved from 89% to 98%. For Warrior 2, the range in baseline was significantly more, ranging from 50 to 75%, where the gap was less in intervention from 75 to 100. And then my baseline mean in Warrior 2 was at 61%, where in the intervention I was at 95%. And for downward dog, again, my range was considerably wide from 50 to 100% while in baseline, and then improved significantly from intervention. I was at 87 to 100. And my mean, again, improved from 73% in baseline to 96% in intervention.
Lastly, we have my results. I started off in Warrior 2 as it showed the most improvement and steady data. Once into intervention, it quickly increased in trend and eventually stabled off at 100% accuracy. My tree pose and downward dog poses both showed some more variability within the baseline phases. So once Warrior 2 stayed off in intervention, I switched to tree pose in intervention, and as you can see, it was already steadying off at 100%, as well as when I moved downward dog into intervention, it was already at 100% for quite some sessions, which continued once I brought it into intervention. Seeing that my poses that were still in baseline during my beginning intervention pose. Seeing that they already begin to steady off at 100% shows that there's a possibility my awareness of the poses and the TA might have affected how I was carrying out those other two poses. My Warrior 2 baseline mean was 74%, and in intervention it increased to 96.8%. The baseline range was from 62% to 87%, and then intervention was 75 to 100%. My tree pose baseline mean was 92.4%. Again, it was already a little high, and it increased further to 100%. My downward dog baseline mean was 86.5%, and intervention mean again was 100%.
Now we're gonna have our discussion. So limitations that we had while doing our replication study, the original article that we chose was very vague in general. Like they didn't include a lot of information on like anything that they did. Like the TAs weren't included in their original article, and we don't know how many steps they had. Like we chose 8, but maybe they had more or they had less. And we had a time constraint. We only collected data for about 5 weeks. And then when we made our TA, we had a flawed operational definition for the last step. So we could have been restated to be a minimum of 30 seconds. Someone could have counted the poses incorrect if we held it for like 37 seconds or 40 seconds. And then another flaw in our TAs was that Warrior 2, Step 3, you cannot accurately measure 90 degrees from the videos. Depending on how someone angled their camera, we couldn't really see, we might have not been able to notice how their foot was pointed. They could have had it from their point of view from 90, but from our camera view, it could have looked off. And like I had stated, there was a data collection error on my end. And then problems with internal validity. We all knew the TA steps due to all of us creating them. And plus we were also each other's IOA partners. So we could have unintentionally improved during baseline because we all knew all the steps that we had to do. And not all the participants were new to yoga, and the participants' experience varied. So that could have also affected our data. And like I stated earlier, that camera angles could affect playback and accurate grading. And another thing is that we never used the video feedback, so we couldn't assess that part of the study.
Lastly, we have our conclusion. So as a group, we concluded that the self-evaluation treatment presented effectiveness in maintaining accuracy of yoga poses. However, we cannot discount the limitations that played a role in this replication study. Most of the participants' baseline data began at a high level, and because of this, it was difficult to see major improvements within the intervention phases. Also, during intervention, there was high stability across all poses for each participant, which suggests that video self-evaluation to be a supportive tool in maintaining accuracy in yoga poses. And that concludes our presentation.
Should we stop recording? Or do you have questions?
All right, I'll go ahead and stop recording.